Welcome back to Conscious Not Crazy. I'm Kori, your host, and as always, I'm grateful to be here. Yeah, gratitude's a big one for me, guys. It helps my days. My days are just better when I start thinking about all the things I have to be grateful for. So I highly recommend that. But yes, welcome back. So something that's been on my mind. As I've mentioned before, I am going through a divorce. It's been going on a while. Um, Not a fun process to navigate, but I wanted to talk about the impact that has on your kids. So this episode is a little bit more specific. Um, so if you are a parent going through a divorce, whether you're the husband or the wife, it doesn't matter. You can hopefully benefit from the things I'm about to share. And I am sharing it both from the perspective of a child that experienced divorce multiple times. So I have lived through parents getting divorced, sorry, and I'm also going through a divorce right now. So navigating that with my own kids. I think the fact that I did experience it as a child is helpful in that process. And of course, all the things that I always talk about, the empathy, the composure, all of those things, man, all of the tools that I share on all of these podcast episodes have really given me a great toolbox to work from in navigating this process. And again, I don't wish this on anyone. None of us want it, but sometimes it's necessary. And you need to have grace for yourself. And you know what? The world's not perfect. And reality is not perfect, and your kids will be fine. Kids are very resilient. Why some people are more impacted. I mean, we're all affected by divorce. It's in some way, in some shape or form. And it will show up later in life. But it's good. I think the more conversation you can have now with your kids, age appropriately. I will share quite a bit about the age of my kids and kind of some of the conversations we've had, but the context of what I'm going to share could apply to any age. But I think communication is key. And what I like to start talking about is, yeah, you've got to tell your kids. So you've decided to get divorced. So what next? Obviously kids are smart, kids are intuitive, kids are probably aware that things have not been great. So what we did is we sat down and had a conversation with the kids. And it was not an easy conversation, but we just told them that, we've decided this isn't working. And by no means does this affect your relationship with your dad or your relationship with me. This is between dad and I. Obviously, this impacts you and affects you, or has an impact on you. We realize that, and we will do our best to navigate that. And then we gave the kids an opportunity to ask questions. Of course, there's a little bit of that, just they need a minute to take the information in and think about it. It's upsetting. Some kids might need some space to process and then revisit it later. Some kids might have lots of questions right off the bat. So really anything is possible. So again, I would just be conscious and in the present moment and try to read your child as best you can based on what you know about their personality. And if they're the kid that needs space, don't press them to give you information. Don't press them to share how they're feeling. That will simply stress them more. Because if a child can't maybe articulate that, or again, some people just need more time to process. So but definitely a great thing to do is to ask questions. And just saying, do you all have any questions? Do you have any concerns? How do you feel about that? Do you want some time to think about that? Would you like to talk about anything? And our kids' first question really was the schedule, like, well, who are we going to live with? Like, or the logistics, I should say, not so much schedule at that point, but the logistics. And we all still cohabitated for a while, which is also not super fun and tricky and challenging. And I have a lot of empathy for anyone that has to experience that. But what I recommend is trying to keep the peace as much as possible, never dragging the kids into your all's drama. That's not their place. It's not their responsibility. They have enough stress and things that they're processing. You're just adding to their stress, and it's very selfish. So really just letting the kids know they're loved by both of you. Our relationship has just changed, but you're supposed to still have a relationship with your dad. You're supposed to still have a relationship with me, and that is separate, and that does not change. And your dad loves you, and I love you, and we just want what's best for you, and we are still going to be on the same page when it comes to expectations from a discipline and accountability standpoint. I think that's very important. And I think I shared the one story when this was happening, and their dad had just moved out. There was a night that I held my son accountable and I instilled a consequence, and he didn't like it. And he shot back at me, well, I'm just going to go live with dad. I hate you. And I know he doesn't mean it. And I know on my last episode, I said, don't take it personal. I didn't take it personal. He's processing. He's probably mad about the circumstance that dad and I aren't living together anymore. It's a lot. And he's really mad that I unplugged his video game. So I didn't see that as an attack on me. I'm just like, you don't like the concept. It could be that you don't like the consequence. It could be a lot of things. It could be that there's a lot of change going on in my life and I'm frustrated. Now you just unplug that. And then he just blew up. And I said, if you want to go to dad's, you can go to dad's. That's not going to be, we never want to use another parent as a manipulation tactic. That is not healthy for your child. It's not healthy for anyone. Sometimes my kids will call me now. I mean, because again, it's like we've always parented together, right? And we've always talked before we've instilled consequences. And now they're at dad's, they're at my house. The rules might not be exactly the same. We're pretty much on the same page, but I can't manage what's happening at dad's, and he's not expected to manage what's happening at my house. So in the beginning, the kids would call me and ask me permission to go places when they were with their dad. And my kids are 13 and 15. So they're in, the preteen, teen, I guess, they're both teenagers, teen years. And I said, you'll need to ask dad. Now, I might say, if dad says it's okay and dad calls me and you just need a ride home and dad's not able to do that, I might be available. But you'll need to run this by dad because you're with him. So we've made it very clear that when the kids are with me, I basically make the calls on what they're going to do and not do, giving them permission when it comes to activities and things with friends, because I'm the parent that's in charge at that point and I have to manage that. And I trust their dad to do the same. But I will sometimes let the kids know if I'm available, but I will also communicate, hey, I want to let you know, because in the beginning that gets tricky because we've never navigated this. And there were a couple of times, there was some frustration because the kids weren't communicating. The kids were saying, well, mom said I could go. Well, mom said this. I encourage you to not take your child's word for it. Talk to the other parent if you can, or text the other parent, whatever communication modality you use. Reach out to them because, again, the kids, this is all new. They might be manipulating the situation, and whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, it doesn't really matter. The bottom line is you just want to establish clear boundaries, clear expectations, let them know that you are communicating so that manipulation can't happen. So when their dad would call me and say, well, kind of frustrated, well, why did you say you could do it? And I'm like, I didn't. I said I would be available to drive home. So now I know. I text him what I've communicated. So there's very clear communication and no questions, because it just takes a minute to navigate that. And I think just using positive intent for the other parent too. I know sometimes my kids will come home and they'll be mad about a consequence they got at their dad's. I'm sure they go to their dad's and they're mad about a consequence or something that happened at my house. And when they come to me with that, I'm like, well, tell me more. What happened before? Again, I don't want to, because my relationships might not be awesome with their dad, I don't want to assume that he doesn't have their best interest at heart. Those are two separate things. It is not fair to your child to bring your stuff into their relationship with the other parent. It's damaging to them. If you talk negatively about the other parent, That is damaging to them. That is their dad. That is their mom. That is selfish. So you should not be doing that. You are hurting your child. So if you love your child, you will never say, it doesn't matter how awful that person is to you, how poorly they treat you. And I mean, the shittiest thing could have just happened, or conversation. That is completely separate. That is not their problem. And that has no impact on their relationship with that parent. And it says more about you if you're going to say hurtful things about that parent to that child. That is just wrong. That's manipulation. And that is damaging and harming your child's emotional well being. And the bottom line is, it's super selfish. This is not personal. Their relationship with the other parent isn't about you. Just because, and your relationship with your child is different than it is with your spouse. There's a different dynamic to that relationship. But if you are saying hurtful things about the other parent, talking about awful things, and I don't care if your child's grown and you were divorced a long time ago, if you're bad mouthing the other parent, the child will resent you, not them. It will come back to hurt your relationship with your child, not the parent you're saying the awful things about. And that is 100% a fact. You can ask anyone that's experienced it. It will make them resentful towards you because that is their parent. And kids want to love their parents. And that has nothing to do with their relationship with the parent. That's you putting your hurt, your resentment, and your anger, your personal experience on them. And that is not fair. So I encourage you to somehow separate that. Whatever works for you. Some parents can talk, some parents can text, some parents have to use an app to communicate. And I would keep the communication to the kids too. I would try to steer clear of personal opinions about what's going on in the other parent's life. I would really try to keep the conversation to the kids, unless you're at a really healthy point and past all the yucky stuff. But yes, but talking poorly about another parent will never serve you and your relationship with your child. So I highly discourage that. Because then it's kind of putting them in a position, it's almost a role reversal where you're putting them in a parent role. Like they're almost having to parent you because you're hurt. And that's just not good. Also, let's say you get divorced and I would be careful too about introducing a lot of people if you're dating or whatever. I'm not saying you can't go date and have a life. You can do all of those things, but I definitely wouldn't introduce your kids right away to someone. They need some time to process. And I would just make sure that when you're ready to introduce your kids to someone, that it's because this is going somewhere and you're in a more serious or committed relationship with them. But just constantly bringing people in and out of their lives can be really hard and challenging. And then the flip side to that, you do bring someone in, you do start dating someone, or maybe down the road you get married again and you're with that person for a period of time. Let's say you're with them 2, 4, 6 years, who knows? And then maybe that relationship doesn't work, but the child's developed a relationship with that person. So again, you break off that relationship. Don't expect that the child's going to be able to do that as easily. In some cases, that may be the case. Maybe they weren't very close to the person you're with, which might have been a sign of why it wasn't going to work out. But let's say they did build a strong relationship with that person. I want you to remember who brought that person into the child's life. Who brought that person into the child's life? You did. So have some grace. And again, let's not badmouth that person. And if it's appropriate and there can be some sort of relationship and it makes sense, it's not about you. And you're the one that brought them in their life. So be cognizant and mindful. Try to see it from their perspective. And again, just communicating. Recently, my kids came home and something happened. I'm trying to remember what it was, but something was said. And I didn't necessarily agree with how they were being parented. But I understand my my ex-husband well enough that I know his intentions in the right place, right? And so my son shared something that was said, and I just said, look, I said, we don't do that. It was something about comparing like to other people. And I said, we don't compare ourselves to other people. We don't do that. I said, Dad did that because he's afraid for you and he loves you and he doesn't want that to happen to you. And that scares him. And sometimes when we're scared, that comes out as anger. And or yeah, fear can come out in the form of anger. So my son wasn't being, and I said, and were you being super responsible? And he said, no. I go, okay, so your behavior wasn't super responsible. Again, you are not this other person. So I'm not going to compare you to this other person. But I understand that he's doing it and saying it because he loves you and he's scared for you. He doesn't want the same scenario. He doesn't want the same situation to happen in the way it did for this person. So it comes out of fear and love. So I'm able to say that in a way because again, it doesn't serve my child. It doesn't serve me to come to be like, oh, great. I can talk about how, well, I could say awful things, but nothing that doesn't serve anyone in this moment. It is not the most helpful thing I can do for my kids. The most helpful thing I can do for my kids is support their relationship with their dad. And I told them, I said, look, I had a conversation with them too. I said, if you want to go hang out with dad and there's something you want to do, don't ever be afraid to ask me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. You don't need to protect my feelings. Because again, kids innately, they don't want to upset us. They don't want to hurt us because they care about us. That is not their job. So I flat out told my kids, look, I am a healthy, whole person, and my happiness is my responsibility. And by all means, if you need to do something with dad or want to go do something or spend time with dad and his family, by all means, you should do that. And don't ever feel bad about telling me that you want to be there instead of with me, because I will not take that personal. I know you love me just like I love you. And I will be just fine. And my happiness is not your responsibility, and your dad's happiness is not your responsibility. And although our relationship, and I reiterate this a lot, mine and dad's relationship looks different. And I know that's weird and that's hard, but your relationship with dad is not. You are supposed to love your dad. Your dad is a really good dad. And that might be hard for some people when they're having a very strained divorce or the relationship is strained because you're frustrated and angry towards that other person, right? But I want you to think about it in the way that by saying hurtful things or bringing that to light in front of your kids will harm your relationship with your kids. Even though your intent might be to harm the relationship the child has with the other parent, all you're doing is harming your own relationship. So I highly discourage you from doing that. And I am speaking of that from personal experience, both on the child side and from the parenting perspective. Divorce is hard. It's hard on our kids scheduling. My kids really like to know the schedule ahead of time. So we have it, and they go certain days every week with their dad and certain days with me. And my daughter, in the beginning, it wasn't super set in stone in the beginning. That was hardest. I say the quicker you can get to an agreement on a schedule, the better. And letting them know what holidays look like we agreed on Christmas. Fortunately, we were agreeing on kids' schedules and holidays and things was not hard for us. We rotate holidays. Usually they do it odd and even years. But Christmas, I said, no way. I said, I want the kids. So I said, I don't care if I have them on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And he agreed. So we both get the kids on Christmas, and we'll be flexible with that. And think about it from the perspective of what's best for the kids. Like if my kids' cousins are in town, of course I know they're going to want to be there. So I'm going to let them go be with them because that's what's best for them. It's not about me. It's not my kids' fault that my relationship with their dad didn't work out. So why would I put that burden on them? That's adding more stress and anxiety to my kid. And have grace for yourself. Because the relationship didn't work out doesn't mean you've damaged your child. Is it ideal? No, it's not ideal. Is the world perfect? No. The world's not perfect. I think it could be extremely dysfunctional to stay in a poor relationship where the communication's not good, or maybe the way that people treat each other isn't healthy, and modeling that for the rest of your child's life. So think about the alternative. I would much rather my kids see me happy and whole and find a healthy relationship than stay in a toxic or dysfunctional one and model that for them. Because remember, what we model is what we teach them. The expectations I have for myself from a partner is what I'm modeling for my child. So if it's not healthy and boundaried, I'm not modeling a healthy relationship. By divorcing, I'm actually modeling boundaries and what I need to be healthy, and I'm being accountable to that. I'm communicating that with them. And some people may see that differently and may not agree, and I'm okay with that. And you really, when you go through divorce, you cannot worry about what other people think. It's hard, but you know what's true is true. People are going to think and say whatever they want. And you can't control that. You can't control other people. So you show up as your best self. You do the best job you can. And you're a good parent. You co-parent as best you can. You communicate with the parent. You don't manipulate the parent or the kids. You have clear boundaries and respect for the other parent. And we try to be, the kids, because we've had it a couple of times, or I've had it a couple of times, I'd have to ask their dad, or they're like, well, I just want to go to dad's. I'm like, okay, you can go to dad's. And then they might be like, well, no, I don't want to go. They're just trying to use it. Like they're saying, like, is this going to work? I'm mad at you. I don't like that you're taking my phone. So I'm just going to go to dad's. I'm like, you can go to dad's. And I'll also let dad know you don't have your phone right now. And if dad doesn't want to enforce that, I have no control over that. But I would imagine dad's probably going to enforce that if I tell him in our situation. So I'm very fortunate in that. But yes, they're going to try things on. They're kids. They want to get away with whatever they can get away with. Because, it's like, you don't ask, don't get, they're going to try things on. But, and then when there's big conversations, we do come together and we still have those when needed. And again, this is new territory for us too. The hardest part for my kids is the going back and forth. That's what they've communicated. So I do things like, well, what can we do to make you more comfortable when you go? Or what can we do to make the transition easier on you? What do you need at dad's that you don't have that you have at my house, or vice versa, because they're here a little bit more. Things like that. But I want to do it in a way that I want them to know I want them to be comfortable when they're there, just like I want them to be comfortable when they're here. And the more we can take off of them on those little things, like making sure I took her to Sephora and let her get all of her skincare stuff. She's 13, that she has at my house to have at her dad's, because that's a thing she probably would rather do with mom. Whereas there's other things, if she needs a new basketball, she's going to ask dad. She needs new track shoes, she's going to ask dad. So it's just, they're still going to go to a certain parent for particular things, and don't take it personal. It's not about you. It's not about you. So I just did a podcast on not taking it personal. There's a big piece to that in navigating divorce with kids. But I really encourage you to keep your yucky stuff out of their lives as much as possible. And that's having conversations in front of them that aren't appropriate, and definitely not saying negative things about the other spouse. And when they say negative things about the other parent, getting more information and trying to be as supportive as possible with whatever consequences were utilized or instilled, or letting them know, well, yeah, maybe mom was just having a bad day and frustrated. Does she have any other stress going on? That doesn't sound like, whatever it is, just have a little empathy, but also have empathy and grace for yourself. There's a lot of guilt, I think, that parents have when they decide to get divorced, but the world isn't perfect. And it's okay for kids to have to navigate hard things. And it can be as hard as you make it, as hard as you tell yourself it's going to be. Everything that's difficult in our lives starts up here. So Try to be positive, encouraging, be empathetic. And then again, just tune into your kids and ask questions. Questions are the best way to gather more information, to see how you can best meet their needs, and then have some grace and empathy and understanding for yourself. It's not an easy thing to navigate. And the thing is, the activities don't stop. School doesn't stop. I mean, in the middle of hours, our son switched schools. And I'm like, okay. And they still want to get signed up for camp and all the things. And then there's the financial piece of navigating that's different. And then, splitting up everything. It's just a lot. It's a lot. So I just would say take it one day at a time, stay in the moment, try not to worry about the future. It will work itself out. It's short term in the big picture as far as how long you're on this planet. This is just a small little bleep, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's just a moment. It's just a moment in time, and it will pass. And you're going to have some good days and some bad days, and that's okay. And just make sure your kids know you love them. I always tell them, like, if you have any questions, you can ask me anything. And then I check in with them. I ask them if they have questions. I'm like, how are you doing? What's the hardest about this? And then I've even asked them, like, what do you think is good about this? Is there anything good that has come from this? And so it's very interesting just to hear, but I think just being very in tune and aware, not too caught up in your own stuff, to not check in with them on occasion, because that can happen too. We get pretty overwhelmed navigating all this on our own, that we don't maybe check in with the kids as much as we should. So just staying on top of that. But yes, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me, and I will make sure all of my contact information is in the show notes. I have a website coming soon. You can reach out through that as soon as it's available. It will also be in the show notes. But yeah. And then one of my favorite parenting books is Loving Our Kids on Purpose by Danny Silk. And that is just a phenomenal book. And it just could be very helpful in this time. It's a Christian-based parenting book. It definitely, they do reference the Bible, but I just love the approach. It's just all about connection over compliance. And I think more so than ever when you go through a difficult or challenging time like this. And you don't know till you go through it. So don't judge somebody that's going through it. So maybe you're not getting divorced, but maybe you have a friend is, and that's why you're listening. I wouldn't judge them, because every situation is different, and it's easy for an outsider to stand outside of it looking in and assume whatever we want to assume and create narratives in our heads. Just like everyone says, well, oh, just wait till you have kids. Everybody wants to judge things. And I think when we're busy judging other people, we're doing it to keep from looking at ourselves and our own life and dealing with our own stuff, because it's hard. It's easier to sit back and, well, I don't know why they did this, or why they're doing that, or why do they let their child say this or do that? I mean, we just judge. We judge a lot, and that does not serve us. That's truly a pet peeve for me, talking about other people. It's like, nope, I have a lot of empathy. I don't know everyone's story. There's usually a reason, like I said, the why behind behavior, even in adults. So I know when my behavior's crappy, I'm probably having a crappy day and I need to recalibrate. That might mean I need to go take a nap. That might mean I need to go meet a friend for a drink. That might mean I need to just go be alone and listen to a book, or go meditate, or go call somebody, or just go sit in silence. I don't know. It's whatever I need. And sometimes I sit down and ask myself when I'm having a moment, I'm like, what do I need right now? And usually the first thing I do is I take a deep breath. I just take a deep breath. Breathing, as my PT guy, Kurt, says, makes everything better. And it does. If you have a pain and someone's pushing on it and you breathe, it feels better. So breathing is probably one of the best coping mechanisms you can use. Closing your eyes, taking a deep breath. It just makes everything better. And that's a great thing for you to model for your kids. Just take a deep breath. Give yourself a minute, take that pause, gain your composure. And I highly recommend when you're having difficult conversations between the other parent, that if somebody shoots off and texts something hurtful or says something hurtful, pause, don't respond. And typically, I just don't respond at all. If it's not about the kids, if it's just something trying to poke the bear, you're better off just not responding. If you don't give a response, there's nothing to respond back to. It ends it, because otherwise it's just a one-way conversation, and that gets old. And so you're usually better off just not responding and saying anything. But I hope this is helpful. I'll probably talk a little more about this as I even continue to navigate this process. But the key takeaways are: talk to your kids, give them space, ask them what they need, ask them what's hard, ask them how you can be helpful. How can we make this more comfortable? And let them know, yeah, I mean, yeah, life's hard sometimes, but we can make the best of it. If we tell ourselves it's going to be hard, it's just going to be harder. If we tell ourselves this is going to be good for everyone, then we can make it good for everyone. And if we're judging someone because we think everybody's supposed to stay married and just work through the shit and stay miserable, then that's your choice. But until you're in it, that's not for you to judge. That's not for anyone to judge, only the person in it. And for me, I no longer wanted to model what an unhealthy, toxic relationship looked like. I want my kids to see what happy and healthy looks like. And everybody has to do what's right for them. And one of my friends who also went through a divorce, she said her daughter, which I thought was pretty higher level thinking, said, well, Mom, it's okay. You need to put your oxygen mask on first. And I love that, because that's true. They say that on the plane, put yours on first. You can't teach what you don't possess. You can't model what you don't possess. And it takes a lot of courage for someone to do what feels right to them over what they think everyone else wants them to do. So remember that, whether you're the mom, the dad, because it's usually one person that decides they're not doing it anymore. It's not always, sometimes it's amicable, but it's not always that way. Usually it's one person. That takes a lot of courage. So whether you're the dad that said you couldn't do it anymore, or the mom, I applaud you at being courageous, because that is not an easy task. But for your kids' sake, keep your relationship with your spouse separate. Don't talk poorly about the other parent. That only hurts your relationship with your child. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this is helpful. Yes, not something I wanted to have a podcast on necessarily, because I hope that I never go through this. But if I can be helpful to anyone out there that's struggling and going through a similar process, I just want to offer as much insight as I can. And I'm grateful that I have gained all this knowledge over the years. So I have a great toolbox to work from as I navigate this. And thanks so much. I appreciate you tuning in.